Adding borders. Borders can be very effectively used to call special attention to an individual cell, an entire row or column, or a range of data. For example, I often use two different borders, one to highlight subtotals and another to highlight the final working totals in a budget workbook. I use them too to emphasize particularly surprising figures or data, ones that I especially want to call my audience's attention to. The aforementioned use of color, either for entries or cells and cell ranges, also works well for this purpose, as you now know. Borders are added much like we added color and patterns before, and borders can be applied conditionally. First, you're going to need to select the area to which you want to create the border. Now remember, that can be a cell, a range of cells, one or more rows, one or more columns, or whatever difference. Here we've selected this particular data, and then we can do one of several different things. We can right-click and choose Format Cells and go to the Border tab. Or we can look under the Format window, menu, and choose Cells and go to Border. Now with the Border tab open, you can go through various selections here. There's None, and this would be what you'd select when you want to remove a border that you've applied. There's Outline, and there's Inside. Inside can be very faint depending on what type of border style you choose. It can actually be rather faint to see, whereas Outline tends to be a bit more bold. You can also colorize your border by clicking on the down arrow in the color box and selecting a different color. So for example, let's say we're going to put a red border around the division specifics here. We're going to click OK. We can hardly see anything. So let's go back, and you're probably going to want to kind of go back and forth with it because it really can be kind of hard to figure out what you want to do. So I showed you an example of how subtle the borders can be. It was almost not noticeable because we chose a thin line and a color that wasn't terribly obvious at that particular time. Let's try the Outline, which would be a lot bolder. We'll do the same thing. We'll choose red for a border. Outline, click OK. And now when we look, it's a much more defined border that you see around it. And this could be applied to anything. It could apply to final figures you may have. It may be a particular column over here where you've got sum totals. You can also even colorize the borders around your charts, for example, too. Now remember, to remove a border, if you've decided that you no longer want it, you would just reselect the area in question, right-click, Format Cells, Border, None, and click OK. And here's a tip. In a tight data area, you may want to increase the height of a row or the width of a column if you're using a wider border style so that your work does not become too cramped. Once it becomes too cramped, obviously you can have problems seeing the material in it. So you would just, for example, here, if you added color here and obviously you've got very little room to work with, you just right-click on it and then choose column width to increase it. For example, right now it's 12.1. Maybe if you gave it a 15, it would work better. Much wider place.